Okay, video 4 in understanding the holographic information systems. And I'm still looking at the front page of the whole Project New Reality Google site, which is holding the information that we need as both change makers, but also pioneers. And pioneers when we begin to really work with what we could call the higher order sciences. And as change makers, understanding of what's going on around us is part of our ability to change energy into a manner that will grant us a position inside the new reality structures. So it's all about trade systems, as we have talked about, because the incoming races, they are of trade origin, and you can say trade is a downsized version of territorial claims. You have something to offer, and you have leverage by what you have to offer. And by that, you can gain position, all depending on which level of the holographic network that what you have to offer can be positioned. And we've talked about, when we talk about quantum principles, there are locality and non-locality. Locality is kind of when you live in your little house and you have that understand. This is your little locale. That's your little, it's Latin. This is the little place that you have got. Locus or is Latin and means this little place that you have got. So with that understanding, you also understand that when we talk about non-locality in quantum principles, it means that the particles or the subparticles in the quantum field are not located on a specific spot within the quantum field. They are entangled, and they work through uncertainty principles that are defined by their upspin or downspin. And it's nothing to do with whether they're spinning around or not, but it's kind of their position within the field. And that's, again, very close to the holographic principles. We're here talking about plugins in the holographic network, where the only thing that is local is your energy system. Your sphere of energy is locality, but your position is non-local. And it works via entanglement. So that's the principles as well, or the dynamics as well, because once you are in that position within the pattern that is local, even though it's also non-local, because you can move around in that energy pattern, depending on the vibrational state of your influential sphere. Similarly, as we could say a spin up or spin down, which is again the position upwards or downwards, that kind of, in a way, you could say, if you want to do a little bit of an analogy of it, which is not accurate, quantum scientists will tell you that. But let us, just for the sake of clarity, say, okay, if you have the magnetic field that is around our planet, that magnetic field has a north and a south magnetic pole. And I'm not here talking about true north or true south. I'm talking about the electromagnetic field that has a north and a south. And that is tilted a bit, which is why true north is the planetary setting, where what we have decided to be north and south, and the magnetic field is tilted 35 degrees to the right, even though they have changed it, so now it's to the left. So it aligns with the parallel universal matrix. But when we talk about the understanding of our planet as we are looking at it from outer space, when we are upright in our own electromagnetic upspin and downspin within space that technically has no ups and downs. And that's where people get a little bit confused, because we're so used to, yeah, that's up. But if you really think about it, if you're living in Australia, for instance, you are, if that's kind of down, then you're standing on a planet with your head down, but you don't feel that when you don't feel you're walking upside down when you're in Australia, right? But that's because in Australia, that's technically up. Because that's the locality in space via the magnetic field, that even though it's an electromagnetic south, then it's still the upright position, because in space, even though you have locality, space is not oriented towards ups and downs. It extends in all directions from your position in space, which gives you, via your magnetic field and your connection to the magnetic field around the planet, gives you the sense of being up and down. So that up is not up as in north and south, which is why kind of when we go with north, south, and east and west, not really important, because what matters is your influential sphere, like a gyroscope that has this fluidity to it, all depending on which way you turn it. It will have kind of pointing upwards as the direction. And that's the upwards direction that goes with our energy system and our position towards the different layers of the magnetic field, so that our emotional field, for instance, is part of the Schumann resonance, which is why some of us can feel the weather. The frequency fence now, the event program 4.0, is connected to what is called the ionosphere. And then we have the top level that extends into space, where we then have no point in direction. So if you kind of get sucked into deep space and you have no place to orient yourself, you don't know what's up and what's down, and there's no quote unquote gravity that ties you magnetically to a locality that is a nodal point within the network of energy that our space is composed of. So you have to have a craft to keep yourself centered, and then the craft, because it's made out of the same type of electromagnetic energy as the rest of the space, becomes a locality. And that's some of the very, very deep features that are within the holographic network as well, and the reality network that we are part of. That what you perceive as the world is in alignment with your energy system. So what your energy system is will determine what you see. So if you don't like what you see, change who you are. It's that simple. So if you don't like your emplacement, if you don't like the timelines you're connected to, change your ways, change who you are, activate that center in the middle of the head, which just kind of got me pondering upon the Buddha is saying when he's leaving, as it is said in the quote-unquote written down text material from the monks, whether it's true or not, said, be your own lanterns. And as some is translating it as a lamp, but actually it has a huge impact. If it's a lantern, culturally speaking, we're talking about some of these rise lanterns that you can light the energy or the fire in it, then it will rise up to the sky. Or if it's a lamp, then it's positioned to the ground, to something. It's what we call nailed to something. So there's a huge difference there. One is movable and goes with actual enlightenment, that is a process of expansion of energy into higher and higher levels of perception and understanding. Whereas a lamp is something that's just there. You switch on and on, not like electricity, right? But you can blow out the candle that's in it, or whatever, oil lamp or whatever's going on with it. So again, translation and words have huge meaning into our understanding of ancient texts, just to put it in context as well, so that we also understand when we're working with this network that we are getting access to. It's not up, and there is no up and down. There is no north, east, and south and west. That is our influential sphere as we are determining it, and as we are aligning ourselves like a gyroscope to the magnetic field that is around our planet and are part of our planet. So I would always claim there is no gravity, because science also knows an extremely weak force. So how come things get sucked to the planet, and why do we need so much energy, momentum to get off the planet, as in kind of propulsion, right? Why do we need that to get off? If we are thinking about that, the energies are getting lighter and lighter and less dense. Why does it take so much to get out of the closest, or most dense type of energy that is around our planet? Because that is what keeps us stuck there, not gravity. It's a magnetic pull to the network that is part of our planet, the electromagnetic energies. And it's all illusional anyways, because our physical form is not physical. It is composed of atoms that the main feature of atoms is emptiness. Or we could just say, well, perhaps it's emptiness because we can't see what's in between the electrons, right? And what's kind of gluing the protons and the neutrons together, the field that they are part of. These are again scalar fields, or what we call going into quantum fields. So again, we have the understanding of it to use, again, inaccurate analogies, but that's the best we have. If we say the quantum field is kind of horizontal, then the scalar fields are kind of vertical again, because they can go in different states of energy that can go up and down, so to speak, which we are also seeing when virtual particles are climbing out of the quantum field and gathering momentum from where they are virtual. But if they gather more energy, they can actually position themselves within the rings, quote unquote, in the cloud of electrons, and become visible because they have got enough physical energy, so to speak, the outer domain, or the enclosure, more correctly, the enclosure type of energy gathered together so it becomes visible inside the enclosure, meaning that it now vibrates on the same state with the same up quark and down quark as we are having inside our reality field. And we are in the same way. Everything is kind of the same, whether you're talking about a tiny particle or you're talking about the human body, even though science keeps telling us, no, there's a difference between the micro and the macro levels of these dynamics. And yes, there are, mathematically speaking. But when we talk about energy dynamics, perhaps not so much, even though they would love to have it that way, or they're brainwashed to believe it that way. Does it then mean that we have an impact on the physical matter that is around us? No, we don't, because of the prohibiting technologies and because of the enormously slow vibration that atoms and matter have inside our reality. So you have to undo the crystallization of the molecules, learn to vibrate them up by changing your mind field, your mental field, into the mind field, from where it can connect to the holographic energies, and then activate the code systems, which will then use the spine into the root that is then reconfigured entirely and disconnected from the racial grids, and remoleculating yourself, as in kind of rearranging your molecules into a high vibrational state. Then you will be able to influence your surroundings, but you will only be able to influence your surroundings on the holographic level to begin with. And that will, if it is permitted inside the enclosure, will then ripple into the enclosure. But since the enclosure are on pretty strong prohibiting technologies that prevents people that are not I was going to say the elite. You have the elite and you have the enslaved. So the enslaved are not allowed to generate or engineer by thought. Only specific lineages such as the brotherhoods were allowed to do that inside our reality when we talk about the architecture. So that's why I keep claiming Einstein was left-wing brotherhood. So therefore he were allowed to do this. Similar with Tesla. He was also linked up to the brotherhoods, although that we can discuss whether or not he was right-wing or left-wing, but he was of a different origin because he came from, I think it's Romania, right? So he was a different version of the brotherhoods. So, and we have brotherhoods in Japan and all sorts of different types of brotherhoods. So we can't just say that that is what it is, but that's the secret societies. They have the allowance to create, but many have fallen to the use of the Atlantean methods, which we understand as magic, using symbols and sounds and creating for personal purposes. Per definition, magic. So when we talk about the workers, they're only allowed to engineer in matter or shovel matter, so to speak. The brotherhoods are allowed to engineer what we call architecture, ideas, blueprints. The bloodlines are technically allowed to create technological gadgets. So that's part of their thing. They are the in-between. Technology is kind of in between. The enslaved are only allowed to work with what's been given to them of tools. The brotherhoods are doing the engineering, and the bloodlines are supposed to implement that into reality. Okay, so this is where you begin to understand that the ones that are part of the brotherhood lineages, they have a higher percentage of what we call avian reptoid type of genetics, which goes with the Nagas as one lineage. And there are other types of lineages there, but they always had the sun with wings as some sort of symbol, or a pyramid with the eye on the top, as you know from the dollar bill in America. But when we talk about the bloodlines, they have different symbols that are what we call as the sigils, or the code of honor, what do you call it? These shields, I forgot the name, what they are called. You have different bloodlines that have different, the nobilities have it as part of their house. They have this coat of arms, I think it's called, right? It's coat of arms. That's defining the type of genetics that they have. The lion, that is a lion or a dragon, that's reptoid, of course, goes without saying. You have the Pegasus or the unicorn, all depending on if they are avian based, or if it's unicorn, it's kind of more what we would call mammal based. So it shows you, all depending on how many stars are there, and you can go into all of these old colorations which have been lost for many of these coat of arms, but the understanding is there, so you know this is where that brotherhood lineage comes from. Or where, that bloodline lineage comes from. Sorry about the houses, the nobilities, and their bloodlines are in their coat of arms, which goes with also when we talk about the Knights Templar and all of these that are operating on the behalf of the quote-unquote gods or aliens that are controlling their DNA as part of what we call at the top of the hierarchy of the power pillars is an alien that is the top brass, often divided into 3 different versions of itself, mostly males, of himself, from where he controls his power pillar. So it runs in all 3 levels of reality, because we are technically in what we call the 3rd cycle energies. Hence, it must be 3-fold, which is why we have Ea and Enlil and Enki, or Anu Ea, and Anu is technically the same. But so that's kind of the division of himself into a brotherhood lineage with Enlil, and into a reptoid lineage bloodline with the Enki. And Enki was the version of him that controlled the bloodlines, and Enlil was the version of him that controlled the brotherhoods. And again, we're here talking Mesopotamia, and we know that that completely fell apart, and Marduk and his siblings that came from a completely different system took over, and they then gained control of the Mesopotamian area and the stargates there. So that's a whole other story. And these are the ones that are Baals. So they are not the Els, they are the Baals. Just to put things in context so you understand that when we are working with holographic energy and units and the fields and the directives and whatever's going on, your genetics determine your position and what you have of leverage inside that system. So if you are one of many of the bloodlines have kind of crumbled and folded literally, both because, as we know, many of the original bloodlines were created in the early version of the hijacking under the Dracos as part of the enslavement, where they became the operators and were to control the slaves, so to speak, creating the realities under the guidance of the gods, so to speak. And the priesthoods are the lineages or the brotherhoods that were supposed to be the middleman between the god and the nobility, which you have in the build, the understanding of the temple, and you have the priest, and you have the king, and you have the god, right? That's that build-up structure that were to be put there. And there's a reason why we have this, when you have the ziggurat in Mesopotamia, or you had the same kind of structure in Egypt, or you had the same structure in Peru or in Maya country, and that's not the same, but in the old version of Mexico, right? In the old Maya country, the priesthood were the one who's supposed to crawl up the stairs to get as close as possible to the heavens, because that's where the priest would then get the literally kind of a craft coming down or a drone coming down, and then being able to connect, because it was outside the very dense at that time level close to the ground. So this is also important to understand that. And when we talk about the Maya temples, you had that snake, that winged snake that crawled up the steps. So it's nothing to do with solstice or anything, nothing to do with that. It's a kind of energetic feature that when you walk up these steps, you're walking into the fourth dimension, because normally there used to be a cube on top of these temples, but they are not there anymore. Okay, so with that understanding as well, we also understand that the fourth dimension is already present inside our reality, but many of the technologies that used to connect people that had the understanding of shifting into the fourth dimension via their genetics and via the different gate systems that holographically were presented as a perception gateway, they have lost that ability. They have lost the ability of non-locality and entanglement, shifting between different states of the holographic field or the quantum field, if you like, but we are still not going with that one. But the holographic field, understanding that to get with the interconnectedness of the pattern that you are a part of, you have to vibrate up the web, like the spider I talked about. And if you vibrate up the web, the similarity in the web will be shown to you to begin with. And that's the path. So you have, when you go into a pattern, say, I'm going to learn this, you have to see it holographically. Then it is at a distance, because it's in a distance since it is in the outer rings of your perception field. So you have to vibrate yourself up through the different layers of your perception field to get to the gate system, where you go from being distant from it into being entangled with it. And then it can imprint, and then you become part of it, and it becomes part of you. And then it can offload its information patterns. Then you are, with that nodal point in the grid, you are then expanding your perception field to find all similar nodal points that have the same configuration. You expand your perception field out to connect to all of the similar nodal points. And with that, you will begin to have the pillars that rise up, and literally it's pillars of information that rises up. And there you will be able to work via your perception field that there has the 9 layers, 9 vibrational states, and 9 layers of mind that it can connect to. And again, the Einer system or the Guru system teaches this as well. It's shown how you have different tasks that you must complete, different initiations you must go through. You see it in Freemasonry as well, that you understand these different degrees of knowledge. And knowledge is not news, and it's not gnosis, even though it's kind of the same idea. But news is connected to the stars and the Stoics, and gnosis is connected to the Gnostics, which were a mix-up of religions that took place in the first centuries BC. So they are a group within themselves, and they mixed everything together, and it's a mess. So I'm not doing the whole gnosis kind of thing. But when we talk about the true secret knowledge, it is not studying the text. It is not studying the words, but it is to be able to connect to it via the holographic information systems, have the correct energetic standpoint from where you can access the information, which will then be transferred into your mind field that you then have to train your brain to be able to decode. And you can only decode it if your chiasm works correctly. Right now, it's tied up to a lot of timelines where we shouldn't be tied up to. That's part of prohibiting technologies. So if we erase all of that and get connected to the true purpose of the chiasm, as in vibrating 9 rings of energy that gets higher and higher in vibration, then we are able to work with what we could say the rings of the chiasm or the rings of the heart field that then expands out in all directions, actually 12 different directions, following the original architecture of the Kundalini rays and the central sun. So we become the central sun in ourselves, and we will have the configuration of our reality field in our heart field. I talk about that in the whole template sciences as well as in the Path Cutter course 3 that is part of the Changemaker course material. So I'm going quite extensively into different aspects of this understanding. And here we're talking about the holographic features of the same thing, Trinity structure, remember, template sciences, path cutter material, change maker, transformative, and upgrading, as well as now we're talking about the practicality of how do we effectively use these patterns or these energy configurations to recreate our energy system, which we must do as pioneers if we want to be the forerunners that are going to build the path in the holographic network that leads us out of here following the original code streams of the original holographic network. So we hereby understand that we are having the configuration of our reality field and our heart field when we have reactivated it correctly. That's also when we talk about correct commitment. We are no longer having personal ideologies in our heart field. It's no longer self and others. It is now that the reality field configuration architecture is now part of your chiasm. And you only operate from the level of the understanding that everything you do should be for the highest good of the many. And that's what's implied, that you can work with reality so you can transform the networks and the patterns that are constituting our physical world and the original holographic features behind the outer domains. And in that learning process, understand that when you're transforming on a reality field level, you will there really see from the fourth dimension what will be shown back to you. Because what is the fourth dimension? The fourth dimension is also principle 4, the reciprocity. What you are will be mirrored back to you. So that's also when we talk about governance. You can only govern a system that when you do mirror something, you will mirror it for the highest good of the other, using the other principles so that you can govern in their highest interest and not in your highest interest. So there's a huge difference there in the understanding of these things. And this is not something you can study and learn by saying. This is a way of being. So when we work with energy, we're working with beingness. We are not working with sayingness or mental concepts and mental constructions where we are like little parrots, saying all of the things that we have studied, because you haven't learned it. You know the information, you have studied it, but it's still linear. It has not gone into process. It has not gone into synergy. So you cannot actively use the information as energy. And that's why on the same page, I'm saying it's time to learn energy work. So, and why is that? Because with energy work, we build the higher order energy system by utilizing the worked with information. And here we're also talking about the new reality programs and their 45D code systems in the knowledge that can be obtained. Again, knowledge is not linear studies. Knowledge is the true inbuilt energetic perception where you use your inner lantern to connect to the code systems from where you will get the instantaneous knowledge of what you're dealing with. You shine a light via that inner field inside the middle of your brain that connects to the inner, that then makes your eyes look at things and unravel the code systems behind, whether you're just using your inner eye or you're using your outer eye. So once you have activated that level, then knowledge becomes perception. So it's not just about knowing stuff, it's about perceiving stuff. So just for the sake, in the transformative energy system text material and the other ones of the transformative or the transition science, because I work with it all the way through and it's explained there. But the 6 steps are first linear psychic energetic sensing and higher order cognitive dynamics, investigating the item from the perception process of sequences of units. That's where things are put into little boxes, right? So that's the step 1 of the perception dynamics. Step 2 of the perception dynamics are the processual psychic energetic sensing and higher order cognitive dynamics, etc. And there we understand the perception process is of opposition dynamics, where we learn to go into the balance point of the two. And that's the third option, the third step of perception dynamics. that we work systemically with the process energetic sensing and higher order cognitive processes, investigating whatever we're looking at from the perception process of synergetic dynamics. So what we look at in a system, we will look at it to optimize it to its highest purity rate, its highest standards, and the highest progression rate. Okay? Whatever we are looking at, that's what we're doing. That's the correct commitment. And then we have the information system, psychic energetic sensing and higher order cognitive processes, and investigating the item from the perception process of holographic dynamics. And that's the fourth dimension. That's what I'm teaching you here. That's step 4. So if you say, well, the first dimension of perception is to learn to see things as units. The second step of perception is to learn to see it in opposition, as we have it with the electron and the protons. So the unit is technically the neutron that lodges into the quantum field. The where you begin to get a dynamic is when you have two different kind of energies that are working together, the one of the past cycle and the one of the present cycle. The one of the present is the proton, the one of the past cycle is the electron. Okay? And then synergy, that's where these two oppositions begin to go into spin, where they begin to transform the two opposition dynamics. So a third one is created out of the 2-1, the father, mother, daughter trinity. And I'm here deliberately using daughter instead of son because it's typically said as the son, right? But that is kind of where you have that one. And it's not the reverse triangle that creates a new organic vessel inside this system, but we are creating what called the highest version of the two opposition or the opposing forces that we are dealing with, the energy of the past cycle, the energy of the current cycle, or the reality programs of the parallel universal matrix and our original holographic features. You decide yourself whatever you're dealing with. And then when we go further into what we say kind of the holographic dynamics in the fourth dimension, that is why we learn to work with information systems, which I'm teaching you here. That's why it's the fourth dimension. That's the true understanding of the fourth dimension. And that's where it becomes non-local and local entanglement. And that's where we build quantum bridges, quote unquote, where we can transfer energy from one end of the pattern to another, which science calls fields, but we know it's a pattern because it's a lattice network that has holographic features. The quantum dynamics are only seeing 1/3 of the true picture because they're only seeing it within the frequency spectrum energies or the fields behind the frequency spectrum. They're not seeing all of the other layers yet. And then we have the fifth step or the fifth level of the perception dynamics that goes with coding and decoding psychic energetic sensing and higher order cognitive processes, investigating the item through perception processes of complex code information systems. That's the 511 pillar, and that's the fifth dimension. That's the fifth dimension of energy that we are to learn to work with in our brains. And the sixth dimension, or the sixth step of perception dynamics, are the integrative psychic energetic sensing and higher order cognitive processes, investigating the item via replication dynamics or imprinting. So when we talk about sensing, we're talking about perception via the heart field. When we talk about the higher order cognitive processes, we're talking about the mind field. And all of that is explained in detail in the transition sciences, as well as going into the template sciences, where they're linking the original perception levels and combine that with the understanding of the perception levels of reality that are connected to the reality buildup, along with the domains, along with the different rings that are part of the configuration of a reality field, which you are seeing to the left. That's the old world order program and how it looks, that are kind of having 7 dimensions, 7 heavens, 7 former earth and past earth and future earth. So the 7 layers of the underworld are the former or the previous types of earths that have been there. The 7 heavens are the artificial realms, as we know from the Mesopotamian mythology, the seven heavens. It's where the aliens are living, right? That's their fourth into fifth, sixth, and whatever dimensions they have that are other dimensional, and some of them are linked to our natural 9 dimensions of the outer domain, but most of them are artificially implanted via alien technology. And then we have, when you say past Earths and former Earths, past Earth or the horizontal plane, where you kind of go from the past version of humanity when you stretch out via the DNA code systems we have in our present time. And that's the 7 different versions of humans that have been on our planet so far. I know science will tell you probably there are more, but these different seedings, again, all the different projects. But the former Earths are part of the racial network that goes beyond what science knew of. That means 12,500 year BC and stretching back to that one before the Little Ice Age. Okay, because we were recalibrated during the time of the Ice Age, the Little Ice Age, where we were hijacked and our planet were tilted and reconfigured, and the technologies were re-engineered and the new type of humans were seeded. And you now know what that means to be seeded in, right? But this time linked up to prohibited technologies, divided templates, divided original organic vessels via the carvers, put into storyboards, alien technology, artificial timelines, reincarnation cycles, all to wear us out and make us engineer or genetically produce what they want us to produce. So we understand that when we do energy work, it's not just that there is the clearing work and the energy work. And I know in the beginning I talk about the energy work in the basic energy work, but that's where you begin to visualize and clear and self-scan and self-heal. That's the first basic step of energy work. That's part of the 1-7 pillar. But when you build a higher order energy system, you must learn to transform these lower fields into its higher order equivalent as the higher order perception field. That's the mind field. There you will learn to reconstruct who and what you are using the holographic network and the original nodal point systems of information that are connected to the original reality field, even though quite a lot of them are damaged in what we call the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth cycle, which really sucks. But if you can go to, for instance, the fourth cycle before Atlantis, via the Lemurian races, you will be able to, they were breaching, or not breaching, but they were getting ready to jump into the fifth dimension, or what we could call the middle of the middle domain, right? But they did not get there fully, and that's why they needed the boost from other fifth dimensional, or what we call fifth cycle races that then came in, and that became the foundation of the Atlantean project. So to move beyond this reality, the correct sciences of what we truly are, because that's part of your past Earths, that's what you have been, that's kind of your past version. That's the regression work that you are doing horizontally, which I talk about in the transition sciences as well. But when you do the vertical one, you're going into the earlier, what we call holographic network and racial grids that are connected to your physical form. So that's where you work collectively. When you work vertically, you're always working collectively. When you're working horizontally, you're always working on self-other axis. So we need to understand these different axes of self-other, horizontal, or self-reality, vertical. And that's where the mind field comes in with the correct commitment. You learn in the horizontal work that the correct partnerships is the goal to reach, but the correct commitment is where you go from horizontal swap, you tilt, and then you get into the vertical alignment. And that's where if we are not in alignment with the true understanding of the highest good of the many, and the heart field has not been activated and are just closed down, and you do that swap around in meditation, artificially push yourself up the vertical line into activating the mind field. You're not activating the mind field by doing the Kundalini activation. you're drawing in energies of the racial grids that you have not yet learned to transform, and they become the Kundalini quote unquote awakening, and the 3 channels in the spine will then be activated by the forces that are in whatever network that you have activated. So that is not the true purpose of getting. That's the makeup of a dark one. That's how people activate, do a Kundalini awakening, and before they know of it, then linked up to some old progenitor that used to be the overseer of that level of our reality, either before or after the hijacking. So that's not a good place, and that's not a good way to go, which is why the Tantra, Kundalini, yoga, whatever, has of course been put out there for, again, under the dark ones and their attempt to get access to physical forms from where they could blend. That was the first step of the blending or possessing and merge with a human field so that they could get a physical form again. And then the whole plot was to recode and rearrange, because they're 5th dimensional, so they can rewrite your entire biocode system and by that take over the vessel entirely. And as they chew their way through the different fields, the human that we know of will then change into becoming a merged version of the dark one, human one, and then we have a dark master inside our reality. Okay. So we understand, to move beyond this reality, the correct sciences of what we truly are, how we are constructed energetically, as well as how we change our energy system configuration, and vibrate our consciousness units into a higher order middle domain configuration of our system, are part of the higher order sciences needed to align energetically and consciously with the future realities and their world beyond our current system. And this is why it's important to understand the dynamics of the holographic features. And you will say, how do I activate that one? Well, clearing work first and foremost, activate your chiasm, learn to vibrate yourself up, learn to shift between different modalities of your brain features, whether it's frequency energies, observance, mindfulness, meditation, upgrading that one to work with density energies, which comes from your heart field to begin with. Once your heart field is purified enough and cleaned to the state where it can begin to adapt into the reality field configuration, it will naturally create a vertical cord into the center of the middle of the brain if you have created that. And I'll talk about that in the Template Science Course 3, as well as in the Path Cutter Material Course 3. Or the Changemaker. You remember the Changemaker courses are course 1, understanding what a Changemaker is, the skill sets of a Changemaker. Then you have course 2, skill sets of a Chaos Pilot. And then you have the skill sets, course 3 of a Path Cutter. And there we also work with why we need to clear out the earlier or older versions of the timelines to be able to do that swap or the shift from horizontally personalized access and into the vertical one, where we reconnect to our energy system of our planet, so to speak, the holographic network, the holographic configuration that is behind our current reality field. Because only if you can do that will you be able to leave the enclosure. You're not leaving the enclosure by crawling out horizontally. Well, there are gate systems that can pull out what is left of the viable genetics when you die if you're cleaned enough. But if you want to do it consciously, you have to do the vertical position out that technically goes through the crown chakra, which is why I brought it to your attention. You have to be able to master the holographic principles and dynamics. And here, when I say holographic principles, the principles of progression and the principles of choice are also holographic and multi-layered, all depending on what level of your perception field you're working with it. Then you unravel a new layer of understanding of that principle, so you truly begin to understand the complexity of the principles of progression and the rules of engagement, because the rules of engagement is not just about you and others. It is technically also how you administer the energies of the reality field you're part of. So the rules of engagement is step 1, how you are. Step 2, how you are amongst others, as in how you are towards yourself, how are you towards others. And step 3, how do you interact with the world that you are made of? So that's the rules of engagement on the highest level in the outer domain. And then we go into what we say the laws of energy, which all goes with technically principle 8, because that's where we have gone through all of the other levels, and that's where we really begin to understand how to work correctly with energy. And we are only able to do that if we have got the correct partnership understanding of why we work with energy, what the purpose is of working with energy. For the highest purity rate, the highest standards, and the highest progression rate that are about transforming the energies of the previous cycle. So if we are in alignment with the humanoids and they say, let's preserve the previous cycle, you are working against your original configuration as part of this system. Here we discard, transform, let go of previous cyclic energies that are no longer of use, so we can upgrade our consciousness units to the highest progression rate that will then go in alignment with the elevation cycles and the future cycles of progression and developmental processes, which is what the laws of the cycles are all about. And the laws of the cycles are also connected to the correct partnership. So they work in trinity systems. I explained that in the transition science classes as well as in the template science classes on different levels. You're saying, why do you keep talking about the principles and the laws and the rules? Because they are holographic. So they adjust interactively with the different type of vibrational states that we are operating under. They work with different types of information that we will unravel via our interaction potentials with the holographic network of our system. If we're working on the holographic network via the personalized standpoint, then it's local. When you begin to work with others, you shift from local to non-local because you technically go into another level of the pattern symbolized and represented by the other, whatever the other is. And then you go from the otherhood into the reality as part of being connected to that one via your heart field, having the configuration there, and by that understanding why you're doing what you're doing to be in service of the reality field itself. Not that it is alive, but it is what you call an expanded energy configuration of what you are made of. So therefore, you are responsible for it as well, and you interact with it by being who and what you are. And then we move it into the highest level of the laws, where we then can begin to change the reality field we're under. But if we don't do it under the laws, then we will become damaging to the original purpose and function of the construction we're part of. That's why the laws are there, to ensure that we work in synergy to create upgrading processes for the energetic construction we're part of, and not the other way around. Hence the regression spiral and the progression spiral. That if you don't follow the laws of the reality field you're part of, you are not only causing harm to the world around you, you're also causing harm to others, and you're causing harm eventually to yourself. Hence the 3-step of transgression. Fuck up the reality and the laws, you will get a penalty. Fuck up even further, you'll begin to harm others. And if you continue to do so, you will begin to deconstruct yourself. The more you're not following the laws and the principles of the rules of the new reality directives, you have 3 strikes. If you don't get it the first time with the penalty, then it will become a punishment. And then it will become the root. And that's where it goes from, first you have the penalty, where you will be put under the enslavement programs. And if you don't get that one, then you will go into the imprisonment programs. And if you don't get that one, then you will get it into the goodbye programs, into the abyss. So that's kind of how it's going. That's how the original outer domain under the restoration program were re-engineered because of the timeline event. And it were amplified tenfold during the times of Atlantis, even though they tried to wipe that level, that quote unquote karma of the racial grids by completely demolishing everything that were connected to Atlantis. But they didn't succeed well enough because it was still imprinted in the energy system and it was imprinted into the consciousness templates, even though they tried to use that configuration of Lemuria to keep that level outside our heart field. And that's why spiritual teaching systems of our age has been focused on kindness and understanding of what we're dealing with and becoming harmless. So there's a lot of things we need to relearn again. So obtaining the true knowledge is therefore understanding how to work with energy and how to transform the holographic code systems behind all life forms and systems of reality. So even though we are getting new reality programs, they are a version of the original dynamics because they know the incoming races that are here. Some of them are actually part of some of the old world or old races that used to be part of our planet in one of the former Earths that used to be in our relative reality setting. We have this current version of our Earth, but there were former versions of it of 7 types, and the Gaia one is the first one, which is why we have got some of the Gaians coming back in, and they are what's called the keepers, the semi-androids. They are the keepers of Earth's configurations within our solar system. So they're technically administering all of the planets in our solar system, but they are predominantly focused on the outer domain section of the Earth configuration reality fields, whereas we have had other types of keepers, let me just call it that have taken care of the middle domain types of reality fields that are what we see as stellar systems. But that is, of course, again, within the frequency spectrum. If you go beyond that and you will see it as middle domains, you will see them as a reality fields, but they will be with the lowest point as the 4th dimension. So therefore, they are local and non-local, and all, depending on what you will be seeing, will be in interaction with your energy system and what you are capable of perceiving and interacting with, so that when you get in alignment with the energies that are around you, it then comes to life. As we know from the quantum principles, it interacts with your perception field and then it manifests around you because you have aligned with it and you have become part of it, and thereby it becomes a reality. But if you're not in alignment with it, then there is no reality. Then you can't see it. Then you can't manifest it. So that's part of the perception field of what they can do as well. So that's the things that we are to learn when we are working with holographic information systems. Thank you.